You're at the crossroads with MDB, ladies and gentlemen. Michael Desbar bringing you this week on the Michael Desbar program, producers. That's right, rock and roll, underground garage producers. First of which, who are we going to deal with? Phil Spector. Yes, the most brilliant, most controversial, most provocative, most creative, most unique producer in the history of rock and roll. In fact, a lot of critics, even though, and I must address it right away, even given the circumstances of where he is at right now, which is in jail for murder, let's not forget. You know, rock and roll is a dangerous place. It's a dangerous place to be because it creates temptation. It creates an isolated narcissism that can culminate in the most dreadful of circumstances. It can also be transcended and be used for great, great things. You know, there are many, many people that can counter all of the tragedies in rock and roll, even though there have been so many, the Club 27 being the classic example where people offer themselves at such a young age. But in this instance, let's stay on track with Phil Spector. He is, to many, many critics and many music lovers like you guys out there, undoubtedly the single most important and influential producer in the history of rock music. He created that wall of sound. That is, that incredible blend of instruments that he used, like, 62 drummers and five bass players and 100 drummers. The whole point being big. These arrangements, he was breaking the grounds and setting a template for a whole new sound, a symphonic teenage sound for teenage America, this wall of sound. He got into the business in 58 as a member of the LA group The Teddy Bears, and they had a huge hit out of the blue, To Know Him Is to Love Him. You know that song. It's a fantastic song. And he realized that he could really do this. It must have been a really extraordinary moment in rock and roll history when Phil Spector realized that he could produce these records, not just push the band or the artist in there and do it, but to actually sort of really spend time and create a new sound with the Crystals. And we're talking Darlene Love here. We're talking Darlene Love, who sang with the Crystals, the Blossoms initially, and Bobby Sock. She was really the template voice for him. And now, of course, Stevie Van Zandt is doing an album with Darlene, which we all are sort of, dying to hear. But the whole teenage symphony thing is what really, really fascinates me. There were so many dozens of imitations of that style of music that Phil created to such a degree where he was just having hit after hit after hit. It's a very, very interesting phenomena. But the whole thing about the Guns situation is really, really awful and interesting. Apparently, what happened to him was when he was very young, he was attacked in a men's room by a bunch of guys and had the beat out of him by these guys. And from that moment on, he carried a gun. And it escalated, man. You start, those who live by the sword die by the sword, and I'm using that obviously euphemistically, but that's what happened. It's a terrible thing. And he just became really paranoid. He's a very small man, and wore these enormous high heels and, ended up crazy, isolated and crazy. And by the 60s, that whole beautiful thing that he created and originated and birthed had come to an end. But what happened, of course, was the Beatles. Let it be, mix it, can we mix it, and then that developed a whole other world for him where he did the solo albums for John and Paul, and he did, worked on all of these Beatle arrangements and stuff with George, and I think McCartney was always very sus about him and thought maybe this isn't cool, and it's just an amazing story. The Ramones he ended up producing, Leonard Cohen he produced, very mysteriously had this very contentious relationship with even Leonard Cohen. In fact, Leonard Cohen, the wonderful poet, I can't imagine, this vulnerable, sensitive, brilliant, womanizing, Zen-like priest. Leonard Cohen makes a record with this isolated, crazy, brilliant Phil Spector. I mean, there's your movie, isn't it? Leonard Cohen and Phil Spector. Good Lord, cast that and tell me MDB at undergroundgarage.com who should play those roles. But, Cohen described it, quote, as being, Phil, that is, armed to the teeth. You were slipping over bullets and biting into revolvers in your hamburger. Okay, that's just one description for one of the artists he worked with. But he was inducted into the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame. And he stunned the award ceremony when he entered with 3 bodyguards, all with their hands on their guns. And he proceeded to make this long, rambling, nearly incomprehensible acceptance speech and then fell off stage. That was in 89. And of course, then you have this relationship with Ronnie Spector, who he kept prisoner, who now has a one-woman show and brilliantly sort of describes the incredible circumstance of her relationship with Phil Spector. Okay, so the ultimate ending to this story is that it is the message and not the messenger. Phil Spector provided us and still provides us with an incredible catalog of songs that we play a lot right here in Little Steven's Underground Garage, and proudly. His private life, that is a whole other story. So there you have it, Crossroads with MDB on Phil Spector. Ladies and gentlemen, we'll be doing producers all week right here in Little Steven's Underground Garage.